It's going to start here. Well, thank you everyone in the crowd listening, and those who are viewing this after the fact. This is a super casual discussion Kostas and I wanted to have about 2 years into me joining the company. I convinced him that this could be a birthday gift. So thank you, Kostas, for allowing us to join. But I actually announced my joining on my birthday 2 years ago. Oddly, I was in the Virgin Islands at that time, which Wi-Fi, trying to do anything in the Virgin Islands, I would not recommend to anyone. But basically an engagement tactic for anyone out there. If you want to announce something on a day where all eyes will be on you, your birthday is perfect time for that. One, because every lead gen service will message you on your birthday saying, happy birthday, can I sell you something? But the other is just all eyes are on you. So, Kostas, thanks for jumping on. I know we're a little under the weather, both of us, with all this crazy winter snowstorms that we're having. But I'm just curious, man, like kind of going back to those first few days of us just like jumping into this full time, like a lot was going on in your life. Do you remember anything special from those days?
I remember nothing. For January.
For our listeners that don't know, why was that?
It's well, the early days of the company were in 2022. Sorry, 2021, when it was just myself for the most part, and you and Brian, the CTO, and Desmond, our AI scientist. We're all kind of working more as advisors, and I just had the idea back then for GoCharlie. But it was pretty chaotic back then, and it's still chaotic, mostly from the perspective that things just take a very long time to take off. And any wrong decision you make at any point could just cause the whole company to fail. So that kind of weighs down on you and just breeds chaos for the most part. It's like, what do we do at any point of the company? That plus I had a kid at the exact same time. My daughter was born the day I formed the company.
It was it's like you were having kids, and then you were also having kids at the startup running around and with their heads chopped off. It's often a funny kind of joke that we make in the internal chat that Kostas is a dad of two, between Charlie the company, Charlie the dog, actually three if you consider your kid as well. I don't know how you do it, man. It's hard enough to take care of myself. It's well, one thing that you may not know, Kostas, is and for those in the crowd, like I originally met the company back even before I joined full time when I was still at SoftBank, and Dustin Dannenhauer, who has recently joined us as an architect of a lot of our agent capabilities. Super excited about that. Him and I met back at Indiana over a decade ago, one of my longest tenured friends. And the way that I got introduced to the company was Dustin was asking me some questions about early stage stock packages, and gave him a bit of advice. But funny enough, at that point in time, I was trying to build a music NFT crypto platform that basically digitized the concept of Bowie bonds with a fan engagement spin. I did some research on the initial idea. Dustin goes, yeah, that sounds really hard, and you can't build anything in crypto yourself. So have you heard about generative AI? And then that's really what got me curious. And ultimately, Kostas and I got to jump onto a call, and I was fascinated with the space. I was fascinated with what Kostas was talking about, what the future was going to look like, and all kind of joined into there. But when I joined on my birthday, I think that was the first time that we actually had a Charlie logo, and I like put that on my computer screen, and I was showing anyone in the Virgin Islands that would look at that thing, which people were on this tropical vacation, some guys on a computer just like, hey, look at my site, sign up for this list. But I think that was the birth of like our first marketing campaign, man running around an island territory trying to convince people that AI was the next big thing. Oh man. So I know there's been a lot that's happened in these last 2 years. I mean, even 2023 was super packed. We've been all over the place this year with the team being over in Europe, team going to New York a couple of times, team being in Chicago, me doing a lot of SF Tech Week work. I'm curious, are there any kind of, since we're on the topic of fatherhood, proud fatherhood moments of the company over these past 2 years that really stand out to you as like moments where you're like, wow, this is awesome?
Oh, for sure. The biggest moments really occurred this year. 2023. I would say when we started to take off. I saw a lot of team camaraderie through the various events that we did. The team just loving each other, becoming more, I would say, like soldiers getting ready for battle. Just like everyone just unifying as part of the company. And that plus, as we made progress on the product, the AI, on fundraising, and we started to close all these things, that meant a lot to me. That, hey, look, we're not just a bunch of misfits, running around with our heads cut off like chickens, having no idea what we're doing. We're actually doing something. We're actually accomplishing our vision of building a company, even though we're first-time founders and we're constantly questioning everything that we're doing. So that felt many proud moments, I would say. And now, as we start to actually move up market, more B2B, I even feel more proud as we start to focus more on sales and yourself and Masa and others, as we do more outreach to businesses and we find businesses that are like loving our product and raving about it. I'm like, wow, yes, like this means everything. It's like it's I don't know what's a good analogy, but it's more like people are realizing that we're good, and that all our hard work is starting to pay off.
Yeah, I completely agree. I feel like momentum is building quite a bit in our favor right now. Just the conversations that I've been having. I mean, I can't tell you how awesome it was yesterday doing live demos with a couple of our customers for their new teammates, and just the impact you see in like the light bulb that goes off in people's faces when you see it in person. It's a different impact. If you'll indulge me a little bit, I think winning Product Hunt twice was one of those moments where I was like, all right, we're a 4-person. We were only a 4-person team at that point. That's the crazy part about the Product Hunt
Yeah,
victory. And we were really the ones pushing the envelope. Like ChatGPT was in its infant, or wasn't even around when we first won. And then the second time that we won, ChatGPT was out there, but it was a shell of what we had already produced as a 4-person team. And so I think it's kind of the David and Goliath moment there. But I think probably the proudest moment that I draw to, and there's been so many moments. I mean, I get goosebumps even telling this story. But if you recall, Breck started their like billboard campaign in Times Square, and like now they've just made that a regular part of their startup program. So it wasn't very cool, but I distinctly remember the Brex rep mentioning it, and I just said I shot him an email thinking like, "Hey, worst they can say is no," and they actually did say no at first. And I just kind of like charmed them a little bit more, and they're like, "You know what? Yeah, let's put Charlie on the billboard." And so you got to go and see it in person, but having a billboard in Times Square, your like first real year in a startup, for me, it was like an awe-inspiring moment, but also it just kind of showed me that we have a special team and something special with our brand that like resonates with people and people want to put out there. But then my mom was like crying when I showed her a photo of it. And like that, those are the moments where you're like, all right, there's a lot of bad, there's a lot of good, there's going to be even more bad, there's going to be even more good. But those are the moments that kind of like fuel you throughout. But I think that's probably my proudest moment of the whole journey. Maybe switching it a little bit more towards where we're going, Kostas, because there's so many interesting projects we have in flight, but it's very rare that we get to like kind of sit in more of a relaxed environment and just kind of talk about things. I think there's so many people that have so many different opinions. When is AGI going to be here? What model is it going to be? Is it going to be all of a sudden thing? Is there going to be exponential takeoff? I'm kind of curious. How do you see the next like 5 or 10 years of AI going? Like, are we AGI in 5 years? Are we AGI in 10 years? Is AGI just like a fictional thing that people make up and like to apply their own definition?
All right, so let's. How many hours do you have?
Loaded question.
A loaded question. Ask both the CEO of an AI startup who also has a PhD in AI who does this for a living, build these systems. It's a very loaded question, but for the most part, as we've all seen, ourselves and even the general public itself has seen how fast AI has moved over the last 3 or 4 years. Is just mind blowing. That even myself and Despina, who do AI research for a living, with the ultimate goal one day building AGI. I think that's kind of the goal of every AI scientist, although it's kind of a taboo to talk about it until recently.
Yeah.
It's been kind of very difficult to keep up with the pace. I think that says a lot about where we're going, which is in the next 5 years. I think, actually, I told this to Jeremy. He's one of our investors, for those on call, who teaches a class. He's a professor at Cornell. And I told his class that they were MBAs. It's like, as future business leaders, note that nowadays, like today, all these AI systems, including GoCharlie, is very good at being an assistant to workers. It assists you with your co-pilot, whatever you want to call it, but it's basically assisting your work. It's not replacing you altogether. Just the power of it just to assist you in your current work, especially in like English, natural language, a few years ago was science fiction. Now it's getting good enough to be your assistant. 5 years from now, we're going to start to see becoming better and better to the point where a lot of mundane things, it'll just straight up do it itself, start automating tasks. And it's not hard to think, by end of the decade, sometime maybe the next decade, it's better than 50% of all digital workers. And it's a rabbit hole. We can talk about this all day, but I'm just stating very empirically that it's moving so fast and it's getting better and better every day. It's not hard to imagine it'll start to do more complex tasks. That a few years from now, it could start doing like full marketing campaigns automatically for a company, where you wouldn't even have to hire a marketer. Now, many implications of that, but I'm just stating its ability. But yeah, anytime anyone wants to talk to me about it, I will always be happy to talk to anyone about this topic for like hours on end.
So I know a question that kind of comes up in the same lens with a lot of people I talk to. That I was even on a walk-in call yesterday talking to an old mentee of mine. Often like, how does the role of X change? And, I think it's kind of, it's, I get where the question comes from. It's almost, to me, it's almost like the wrong question, because everybody's viewing it from how does this job change? And I think it's more like, how is the way that we interact with technology changing? And then that often drives how a role is going to change.
Yeah.
Like, I used to be a big finance person, and I still am involved in it to an extent. And there's definitely some opportunities in that space. But if I'm sitting there thinking about building a generative AI tool to create financial statements, like, that's a very high degree of precision task that honestly templates are probably going to be better for. Because if an AI gets one of those things wrong for a public company, then that we're talking about lawsuits, we're talking about all these other things, and then there's just no auditability. But I do think where it changes the game for finance is like, I'm now not sitting in the weeds of all the raw data lakes. Instead, I've given the AI an understanding of what this data is, and I am just more asking questions. So I'm letting the technology do a lot more of the lifting. And I think that's what we're going to see across a lot of these things. Like if it's a high precision use case, you're still very much going to have human in the loop. But I think for anything that we're like the Office suite, for instance, I could see a future where the Office suite is just a background layer that an AI agent interacts with. Is that kind of what you're thinking is the direction we're heading, Kostas?
For the most part, yeah, at least short term. And we're seeing this with our product, and we're seeing this with ChatGPT and others, where it like Charlie takes care of a lot of the heavy lifting. It'll go into all your data, um, analyze everything, and pull the relevant information, and then run tools over it like summarization and analysis and so forth, and provide you various summaries and analyses of the data, or answer whatever questions you have about the data. Like just that alone is like so powerful that what for 100 years now, you've had various roles, whether it's from legal to accounting to finance, like almost every field. Most of the roles people had were basically just analyzing lots of corporate documents and data and so forth, and just creating reports out of it uh, to make decisions. And now we're basically saying, okay, well, you can do all this in a matter of seconds and go straight to the decision making process. Long
Yeah,
term, but yeah, go ahead.
it's there's a lot being made about like AI being a deflationary technology for a lot of types of work, and I agree with that. But I think it's also an inflationary technology because if the mundane becomes easily doable, then the premium you're going to be paying for people that can actually be intelligent or have subject matter expertise to understand the quality of these outputs, the where to plug these assets or these types of systems into existing processes, I think is going to shoot through the roof. It's kind of like the construction workers when everybody was in COVID shutdown, they automatically had this like 5-year wait list for building pools or building very specific things for people's houses. I think that the demand for people with very specific skills is going to become much, much higher in this post AI being on the scene world.
It's it's going to reduce the barrier to entry to almost any job that requires you just to work on a computer heavily, to the extent that the only way that years from now, maybe a decade at most, to get a good high paying job in any field, to compete with everyone else who's also using AI, you're gonna have to stand out like a shit ton. It's going to be very difficult to stand out because AI is giving you superpowers that anyone now, even with a high school degree, can enter a lot of roles, even in data science, where, yeah, they may not have any clue how any of these methods work. Like in data science, you have like you cluster data, you analyze data, regression, and so forth. All you care about is, okay, give me a summary of an analysis of the data. Do this, do that. You don't know how it does it, but it does it. And then you have a summary, and you have the results. Then maybe all you need on top of that is sprinkle some of your magic touch, and that's it. And in that world, it's like, how do you stand out?
Yeah, it's I think it's going to become harder and harder. I have all sorts of theories, but like if search is going to get screwed up by a lot of AI generated content, it's kind of funny because it's like search is being screwed by the thing that it very well created, which is these models, and these models are tuned to create SEO articles, and then those articles may very well diminish the the quality of searches.
Well, look at a stock photography or digital artists that create various forms of art based on commission. Um, Now you can just go to any AI in any style and get any kind of infinite art for pennies or even free. And a lot of artists are, going. They're starting this anti-AI movement because they're seeing their bottom lines drop heavily. Same thing with copywriters. Like BuzzFeed is a good example of them replacing maybe mediocre writers with just generative tools that can write articles very fast and are just as good as the ones the writers can do. Um, it becomes basically like if the AI is as good as a professional, how good does the professional have to be to stand out from the AI?
Yeah. I'm curious. I know you did a lot of work in neuroscience, in a lot of evaluation. In many aspects, most people view building AI as like trying to replicate the human brain. If you bear with me for like a sci-fi second, like what is your view about building AI brains, and just like how far off from the human brain are we with current capabilities?
We're still actually very far off. Uh, One, even in neuroscience, we're just, I would say, society as a whole is just beginning to break the ice in understanding how the human brain itself works, let alone consciousness and other aspects. Um, all we can do is to mimic how we work as a black box, meaning like, is the transformer neural network that all these AI models are based off a true representative of the neural spike networks inside the brain? No, not really. Is it a good analogy? Yeah, it's a good analogy, but definitely doesn't work the same way. Uh, but that said, you know, we may not need to mimic exactly how the human brain thinks in a biological, algorithmic way to to think like we do, or to at very least to be as productive as we do. Like my goal for us for GoCharlie is not so much to invent conscious AI where it has emotions and it's conscious. It's more of creating AIs that are as productive, if not more productive, by mimicking our abilities. That's ultimately the goal of most scientists. Would you love to have an AI that's emotional, considered conscious? Maybe one day, sure. Why not? Uh, and that'll come at some point. For sure, it'll come. But the goal, really, at least as a business goal, is not really to mimic exactly how the brain works. It's more, sorry, it's not to duplicate exactly how it works. It's to mimic it, basically.
Yeah, it's kind of this interesting conversation that I think gets glossed over. In Yuval Harari from *Sapiens* and his series of books thereafter seems to indicate that consciousness is almost a redundancy, and at times is to our detriment. And so it's always fascinated me that people are like in pursuit of conscious, you know, technology, because there's a lot of parts of technology that many people decree to be a much better way of doing things. They're like being rational and non-emotionally activated leads to better decision making and being more in line with your goals. And so like that same thinking is almost the opportunity in AI, where it's like, yeah, we want to take the best parts of human thinking, but we want to, make it cold. And so I've always thought that's an interesting undiscussed part. But I think where I get with all this AI stuff is the more that I learn about AI, the more impressed I am by the human brain and just how efficient it is. Like it is unbelievable.
Oh,
The
yeah.
things we can keep in context, think about, recall, pull back together. It's truly insane.
Well, the human brain is more powerful than pretty much the biggest supercomputer right now on the planet. But it's definitely a lot more effective than any AI out there. So it really is the model of computation and intelligence for us to mimic or one day duplicate in actual AI itself. But the brain, as beautiful as it is, uh, actually, I would say, since it's so beautiful and such a great inspiration for AI, uh, a lot of scientists have taken it upon them to try to mimic it, sorry, to duplicate it. But following that research, and I did some of that in my master's, we've got a long way to go. And I suspect that much sooner we're going to find a way to mimic it by assuming the brain is more of a black box and mimic the inputs and outputs of it, to the extent that we could argue, is the AI truly emotional or conscious, or is it truly intelligent in the same way the human brain is? This goes back to a philosophical argument called Cyril's Chinese Room, which, for those not familiar with, is basically you pass these Chinese characters into the slot of this room, and then you get a perfect response back every time. And the way it works is that somebody in there is just doing a lookup. That given this input, it looks up from this massive infinite book what the appropriate response is, the perfect response. And you can argue, well, is that conscious? Is that true intelligence? And I think that's going to have some big implications in the future. That was AI mimics a lot of our abilities, we'll have to start defining: is it truly conscious or intelligence or intelligent?
Yeah, I mean, there's some humans that I don't even know if they're conscious. They're going through the motions, but that's a separate point. I'll always also think that it's kind of funny when people are like, "Oh, well, like, did this AI cite its sources?" And I'm like, half the time that people are talking, they're citing sources that are completely wrong, or they're plagiarizing stuff. So it's kind of this fun game. There's got to be a name for it, but like subjecting robots or AI to like unreasonable standards relative to humans. But I guess that's the difference between what you expect of fallible people and what you expect of a system that's supposed to be designed to be perfect.
Yep.
So I know we only got a few minutes here because we're both quite busy these days, but a question that I'd love to leave things off on. If say you're sitting at the end of 2024, what do you feel we will have achieved as a company that you would consider a successful 2024?
So we'll talk more about this in more meetings.
Yeah.
So as a I gotta say, as a hint, as a tease to all the viewers or listeners here, like, we are building an insane amount of IP right now in the back end. Our own multimodal models, large language models, agent models with cognitive abilities, tool usage, RAG systems that competes is as good or better with a lot of the big players. And we're doing it at a very small level. And we're aiming to push a lot of this tech into the business world, because we're already receiving a lot of attention, a lot of outreach by big players. So big things are coming, and we're going to prove, hopefully, once and for all, that David versus Goliath, that David can also compete with Goliath in a market where people think only Goliaths can exist and actually build this kind of tech.
Yeah, I think I'm really excited about what's coming in 2024. Like we've built some pretty incredible technology, and I think 2024 is going to be really bringing it to market in new ways. And you're going to start to see some really advanced stuff on the agent side, as well as the Charlie 1 model coming online in a much more robust way. So stay tuned, everybody. Thanks for joining us for this lovely little 30-minute session. Kostas, thank you for indulging me as a birthday gift. It's great to have everyone, and we'll be doing more of these in 2024, so look forward to that.
Thanks, Brennan.